Number 6 is another Dale Romans trainee, bookend with King Zachary at number 8 and Axelrod for Mike McCarthy at number 7. And his name is Mr. Freeze. Very, very impressive in the West Virginia Derby. I think he's a horse that we're going to be really, really talking about in the future. It'll be interesting to see if Dale Romans tries to get him into the classic picture via the Pennsylvania Derby or running against older horses in the Gold Cup. And if he's a horse that will cut back and run in the mile, or maybe take the step to the classic, or run in the mile and then maybe run in the Clark. I mean, so that could be his Derby, Preakness, Belmont, and Breeders' Cup Classic. He is a very, very exciting prospect, has all kinds of speed, and he might be one of those horses that has more speed. So he's a very, very exciting prospect, and Dale Romans has to be very pleased with him. So we'll see where he goes next. He's definitely a top 5 horse. He's right outside of it, number 6. And then in the number 5 spot is Bravazzo. Bravazzo ran for the first time in quite some time 2 really good races in a row. Ran very, very well in the Travers. He was no match for the first 2, but is a grinder. He's the type of horse that in a multi-million-dollar race, he could pick up that big check. Maybe not get his picture taken, but you do the math. Everybody knows how to do, knows what those numbers produce when you're looking at $6, $7, $8 million races. $5 million races and the like. You finish 3rd or 4th, you hit the board, you're going to be going home with a nice chunk of change. So that's what Bravazzo brings. He's a horse that is going to get you checks, which is how I describe Vino Rosso, who hasn't been getting checks here lately. He certainly didn't get one in the Travers, but Bravazzo did, and he's the kind of horse that could sneak up on you. I'm not by any means picking him to win the Breeders' Cup Classic or even win any prep that Wayne Lucas is going to target for him prior to the mile-and-a-quarter race in Louisville. But he's a horse that just keeps on coming, but at the same time, you just never know about him. But for right now, he merits being number 5. Number 4 is Mendelssohn, the runner-up in the Travers Stakes. Fantastic performance. He really redeemed what a lot of people thought of him, which was, he redeemed himself to be a horse that is a star and could definitely impact with his speed in the Breeders' Cup. The key is going to be if he's fortunate enough to make it, whether Parks is going to be the prep, the Pennsylvania Derby, or if Aidan O'Brien decides to take advantage of the 5-pound weight allowance, going a mile and a quarter, and hopefully an improved effort at Belmont in the Jockey Club Gold Cup, whichever direction they go in, this horse, if he can rate, and if he can be more fit to just do that, rather than literally do what he did in the Travers, go to the lead, against the likes of horses like Diversify, who has speed, and some others in there, he's a horse that could maybe finish a little bit more strongly than what he did in the Travers. He's going to have to against those kind of horses, but he's going in the right direction. But the key is going to be, or the $64 question on him is going to be, is now that he's back in the mix, can he maintain it? Can he follow that up and reproduce and do better than what he even did at Saratoga? So Mendelssohn's number 4. Number 3 is Promises Fulfilled, who is, of course, one of the horses on the front end challenging Justify in the Kentucky Derby. He's been cut back in distance, and he has found a secure home as a sprinter. He was very impressive in winning the 2 big stakes for 3-year-olds at Saratoga, winning the Amsterdam and the Grade 1 Allen Jerkins. He's obviously punched his ticket to be a serious sprint contender, but it'll be interesting. Dale Romans has an option to maybe go up in distance at the mile if he feels like that could be as effective for him. And also keep in mind, he's a horse that still, from time to time, if he stays in training, could increase, have some starts where he increases in trip. He'll have runs where he'll be running at some added distance. And again, he's a horse that could run in the Clark or stay within that smaller, that shorter range and run the Cigar Mile. That could be an option for him as well, whether he runs in the sprint and goes to the mile, runs in the mile and stays at a mile, or goes from the sprint and goes to, as I said before, it goes from the sprint distance to the Clark. So there's a number of ways that he could be utilized, but right now he's very, very solid at that sprint distance to 6 or 7. So that's probably where he's going to go. He's certainly, regardless, his efforts have earned him a number 3. Number 2, of course, is the top filly in the country, Monami Girl. She's number 2. Again, I would really be curious to see how good she is if the distaff was a mile and a quarter. At a mile on an eighth, we know she's good. She's going to be very competitive, at least in my mind, unless otherwise noted or proven, against Abel Tasman. And if and regardless of whether Elate is in there, whether she decides to go to the Classic or stay against her own sex, running against her rival and these 3-year-olds. But Monami Girl is, definitely a horse that, we're going to be talking about in the coming weeks. She's a star, and she's number 2. And number 1 is the obvious choice, the Travers winner, Catholic Boy, trained by Jonathan Thomas and ridden by Javier Castellano for his 6th Travers win, 201.94 in that 4-length score in the Midsummer Derby. Now he's a Grade 1 winner on turf and dirt. His options are many and varied, like another horse we're going to talk about that won a Grade 1 stake at Saratoga this past weekend, and that would be Yoshida in the Woodward. Catholic Boy is definitely an exciting prospect, and right now he looks like a horse that is on the up and up. The skies are bright for him, and again, the Jockey Club Gold Cup, he may be the one that ends up in the Gold Cup, and that's just going to be beneficial to him, going 1.25 miles again if he doesn't have any regression. The added, not so much the distance, but the added benefit of getting the weight allowance of 5 pounds as a 3-year-old running in a weight for age race. I think that's going to really, really help him if Thomas and his group decides to go in that direction, Jonathan Thomas and Robert LaPenta. So I'm excited about wherever he goes. The Hill Prince is another race that they're looking at that Jonathan Thomas talked about in the post-race press conference on the turf. And so that's what makes him great. He makes turf races exciting, and we need more of that in racing. So Catholic Boy is a horse that you have to be, pretty enthralled and enamored with. He is certainly a horse that some don't think can compete with the West Coast or with the older horses, be it from the West Coast, accelerate and diversify the top Eastern handicap horse. But I'm not so sure. Again, the jury is going to still be out on how these horses perform in Kentucky versus their home bases. So that's what's going to be another one of those $64 questions. I have less of them than I did going into the Travers. We got some clarity there, but certainly going, to Kentucky, a lot of questions are going to be answered and certainly posed in the build-up to the Breeders' Cup. Meantime, that's your top 16. We'll have some revisions and some adjustments and tweaks made on the next CS Racing Report.